Hello, my viewers. Welcome back to another episode of Into the Unknown. In today's episode, we dive into the 40s. We're taking it all the way back to talk about the Moonlight murders of Texarkana. The culprit was the Phantom Killer entity, or not an entity, but a person who has not been identified, almost like a ghost, was there, gone, and did what he did and never been caught. They had different suspects and different leads, but they never found the person who's responsible for those murders. So we dive into that story today. So I hope you guys are ready for the thrill ride. So if you are, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And without further ado, let's step into the unknown.
Friends used to talk about the things we used to do, but until you return, I will be faithful to you. I will be faithful.
An unidentified assailant known as the Phantom Killer, who committed the murders of Texarkana through the spring of 1946. 5 people were killed, 3 were wounded, while there was one major suspect. He was never convicted of these crimes. On February 22nd, 1946, 2 young people, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Lowry, were parked on a secluded Bowie County road outside Texarkana. They were forced out of the car by an armed man, his face hidden by a burlap sack mask with 2 slits in it for eyes. The assailant beat Hollis with the gun, cracking the young man's skull in 2 places. He then sexually assaulted Lowry before fleeing when he saw the headlights of a car approaching. Both of these victims eventually recovered from the incident. 1 month later, on March 24th, 2 more young individuals, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, were found on another Bowie County back road. But this time, both were shot in the back of the head with a .32 revolver. Blood stains on the ground indicated they had been killed outside the car and then put back in it. The following month after that, on April 14th, teenagers Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker were found dead in Spring Lake Park on Texas side, with their bodies found some distance away from their car and the weapon killing them being a .32 revolver again. It was said that the young women in both of the horrific killings has been tortured and sexually assaulted before dying. Police began patrolling in secluded roads and lovers' lanes. There was a lot of different adaptations, of course, of the Moonlight murders. The main one that everyone probably knows from the 70s was The Town That Dreaded Sundown. They kind of took the case and made it into a documentary style and kind of like expanded on it because you don't know exactly who the culprit is and all the different things that kind of went into it. And they usually do that a lot, for a lot of real life cases we've seen. Of course, Norman Bates, like we mentioned before, was based off of Charles Abright, like that. They kind of changed it completely what Charles Abright was, but it kind of like followed the basis of that. We also seen, The Exorcism. The Exorcism 1973 was based off of a Maryland boy, who was 14 years old. They call him Ronald Doe. They never revealed his name because he was underage and he had the exorcism that happened to him. So we've seen this happen many times before, and this is another one as well. But that's a fun fact right there. But let's dive back into the story and see how this story leads to its next events. The next month, on May 3rd, an isolated farmhouse in Miller County was the scene of another murder. Virgil Starks was shot twice and killed by an attacker standing outside the front window. When the dead man's wife, Katie Starks, heard the shots and ran to the phone, she was shot twice in the face. She was able to escape and run to a nearby farmhouse for help, though a .22 pistol had been used in Starks' death. Tire tracks similar to those in earlier cases were found at the scene, and the crime was generally attributed to the same killer. In all, 2 women and 3 men were killed. With each new murder, panic rose higher in Texarkana. Citizens bought weapons and stayed in their homes at night, literally dreading sundown. Law enforcement officials on both the Arkansas and Texas side of the city worked the case. Texas Rangers arrived, including the handsome and charismatic Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez, and reporters from all over the county flocked to the town, adding a new level of chaos. When neighbors reported seeing strange lights from the Starks farmhouse, local police surrounded the home, only to find Gonzalez and a woman reporter from Life magazine taking photos of the crime scene with flashbulbs. The murders would soon be dubbed the Moonlight murders by the news and media, although the first 2 occurred a week after the full moon, and the final attack occurred around the time of the new moon. Because he seemed to strike and vanish, the Night Stalker was also dubbed the Phantom Killer by the local newspaper, the Texarkana Gazette. To this day, the identity of the Phantom Killer remains unknown. While the case is still open, it is considered to be a cold case. In 1996, the Texarkana Gazette published a 24-page special section called The Phantom at 50, and the crime was revisited intensely in 1996 and again in 2003 by the Dallas Morning News. And that is the story of the Moonlight murders of Texarkana. Now, we've seen a lot of different suspects throughout time, different people who they thought was the Phantom Killer, even some people who claim to be the Phantom Killer trying to take I don't know, his glory. I won't call it glory, but trying to take that and add them to themselves. We've seen one guy who wrote a poem and committed suicide and then tried to make it seem like he was the Phantom Killer and couldn't live with himself. And they did a deep dive into that and investigated, and it turned out to be not true. So there's a lot of different individuals that was labeled a Phantom Killer, but it was one person who they actually thought was the killer, and his name was Yoel Sweeney. Yoel Sweeney had a history of car theft. He had a history of counterfeiting things, a history of assault, all type of things as well. And his wife did say that she believed that he was the killer. She has said different things and mentioned stuff, and the main thing she mentioned things that happened in the murders that was not revealed to the public. That's what led them to believe that he could possibly be the killer. So they wanted her to testify, but she refused to testify. She was his girlfriend at the time, then she became his wife, and then she refused to testify, and it didn't lead to anywhere, and they dropped it. In my opinion, if that was to happen, and someone would tell you something, like if I told him like AB, but we know A, B, C, D. And if somebody came to me and said A, B, C, D, I only told one person that, I only told them what I needed them to know, that lets you know that someone was involved like that. So they should have dived into it. And he probably was most likely the culprit, the Phantom Killer that went out there and took out all those people. So he passed away, I think, in 1994 in a nursing home. So they never got an opportunity to, to even dive into it. And it's kind of over now too as well. So that right there is the story of the Moonlight murders of Texarkana, the Phantom Killer. That's the story right there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys next time on the next episode of Into the Unknown.